Hi, it's Brian Kelleher with Keller Williams Realty, and I'd like to explain to you exactly who needs to be present at a real estate closing, so stick around to find out. This has come up a lot in the last year and a half since the pandemic started at the beginning of 2020, and basically as a buyer or a seller, your real estate closing is fast approaching, and who needs to actually be there? And the short answer is nobody. No one really needs to be there. That's not literally correct. However, as a buyer or a seller, you do not need to be present at your actual closing. As a seller, it's really simple and straightforward. There's not a lot of documents that a seller needs to sign. So typically, the real estate attorney will email the seller their documents. The seller can print them out, take them to a notary, sign them in front of a notary, and that's that. For a buyer, it's a little more complicated because there's usually a mortgage involved, and so there's a lot more documents that need to be signed. However, the process is about the same. The closing attorney will email the buyer the documents. The buyer can print out the documents, sign them in front of a notary, and that's that. In the case of a buyer, it's a little more common that the closing attorney might send an actual physical package. That way they can bookmark exactly what needs to be signed and exactly what needs to be notarized. However, again, the process is about the same. Take it to a notary, get everything signed. As a buyer or a seller, once that part is done, you want to scan the documents. And if you don't have a scanner at home, you can do it with your phone if you have a smartphone, or worst case scenario, take it to a Kinko's or something like that. But get a scanned copy for your personal record. And then you want to overnight the original documents back to the closing attorney. You don't have to send them overnight. You just have to send them with some sort of tracking so you can track the progress of the package and make sure that they get there in time for the actual closing. And that's about it. In terms of the money, on the seller side, they will usually wire the funds to the seller after the closing. And for the buyer, you either need to drop off a certified check prior to the closing or wire the funds into the closing attorney's office prior to the closing. A few things that can complicate it a little bit is if you happen to be in a part of the country or someplace where it's just really difficult to find a notary or it's really inconvenient for you to find a notary, still not a problem. The closing attorney can arrange for a mobile notary to come out and meet you, in which case typically the mobile notary will print out the documents and bring them with them, so you don't have to worry about that part. If you happen to be in another country, there's international notaries. So again, it's still not a problem. And if you happen to be someplace where you can't find an international notary in another country, still not a problem. We can arrange, as long as you've got internet access, we can arrange for an online closing where basically it's like a big Zoom meeting and there'll be an online notary on that meeting and everything is done virtually. So again, short answer to the question, do a buyer or seller need to be present at the closing? No. However, it's nice sometimes for the buyer and the seller to actually sit down together at the closing. For the seller, it's nice to see who's going to be moving into the house that you've lived in. And as the buyer, it's nice to be able to ask questions of the seller that maybe you haven't had a chance to ask yet, such as like who the weirdo neighbors are, or the switch in the garage that turns on the garbage disposal, or things like that, or when the trash pickup is. So it just makes for a nicer overall closing experience if the buyer and the seller and the agents can all kind of sit down in the room together. So I hope that's helpful to you and for your closing. If you have any questions about any of this, let me know. And if there's a specific topic you'd like to see us do a video on in the future, shoot me an email or a text. And in the meantime, thanks for tuning in and stay in touch.